Most people watch you and ask one question: how does he get away with it? They point to his luck, his charm, or the sheer incompetence of the fictional police. But as a legal and psychological analyst, I see something much more sinister. Joe Goldberg isn't lucky. He is a master of the pre criminal gray zone. He operates in the blind spots of our legal system, the specific gaps where unsettling behavior hasn't yet crossed the threshold of a tribal offense. He doesn't just stalk, he social engineers his environment to make his crimes invisible to the law, and more importantly, justifiable to himself. He recruits you, the viewer, into his sheer logic through a process called moral disengagement, a psychological mute button for the conscience. Today, we're stripping away the romanticized narration. We are putting Joe Goldberg on trial using the rigor of the Protection from Harassment Act and the cold reality of criminal profiling. We are closing the Goldberg loophole. This is the depth anchor. In the UK, under the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, stalking is defined by a course of conduct, specifically sections 2A and 4A. To the layperson, stalking is about a man in a dark hoodie. To the law, it's about a pattern of behavior that causes alarm or distress. Joe's first layer of defense is strategic victim selection. He doesn't create chaos, he enters it. He targets individuals like Beck, Love, or Marianne, women whose lives are already in a state of flux, ensuring that his presence is perceived not as a threat, but as a solution. Before Joe ever lays a hand on a victim, he has already committed a litany of offenses that the system is too reactive to catch. Let's talk about digital surveillance. In season 1, Joe steals Beck's phone. Legally, this is a breach of the Computer Misuse Act. By intercepting her private communications, he gains narrative dominance. He knows her vulnerabilities, her secrets, and her schedule before he ever says hello. He's performing a vulnerability exploit on a human being. In criminal law, we look for two things: actus reus, the physical act, and mens rea, the guilty mind. Joe's legal out is that he believes his mind is pure. He tells himself he's protecting them. However, the law employs the reasonable person test. It doesn't matter if Joe believes he's being romantic. If a reasonable person in possession of the same information would know that his conduct causes distress, the crime is complete. Joe's subjective love isn't a defense, it's a confession of fixation. The system fails here because it is reactive. It waits for the physical strike, while Joe has already won the psychological war in the shadows. Why do we, the audience, find ourselves almost nodding along with his voiceover? This is the power of moral disengagement. Proposed by psychologist Albert Bandura, this is the process where a person convinces themselves that ethical standards don't apply to them in a particular context. Joe is a virtuoso of this. He uses three specific maneuvers. First, advantageous comparison. Joe tells himself, I might be tracking her GPS, but I'm not as bad as her toxic boyfriend. By positioning himself against a worse villain, he reframes his atrocities as virtues. Secondly, he uses euphemistic labeling. He isn't kidnapping someone, he's giving them a safe space to heal. He isn't murdering a rival, he's removing a threat to the woman he loves. The third and most dangerous is the displacement of responsibility. Joe views his violence as a reaction to the victim's flaws. In his mind, he is a monster only because the victim forced his hand. This is the same psychological architecture used by institutional predators, the ones in your office, the ones in high power circles. They find a flaw in the victim to destroy their credibility capital. Joe understands that in the legal system, credibility is currency. When he frames Dr. Nicky or writes suicidal notes for his victims, he isn't just escaping a cell, he is perverting the course of justice. He bankrupts the truth so effectively that the law becomes his unwitting accomplice. If the official narrative says Dr. Nikki is the killer, then for the law, Joe Goldberg doesn't even exist. So, why doesn't the police see him? It's not just bad writing, it's a reflection of a real world phenomena called perceptual power. Joe Goldberg presents as a bibliophile, a protector, an articulate, nice guy. He hides behind the halo effect, a cognitive bias where our overall impression of a person influences how we feel and think about their character. Because Joe looks like he belongs in a library, the system grants him an instinctive benefit of the doubt that it would never grant to someone who fits a criminal profile. He also exploits the single incident reset. Most stalking laws require a proven course of conduct, usually two or more related incidents. By moving from New York to LA to London, Joe effectively resets the legal clock. He knows that police departments rarely communicate about creepy behavior across jurisdictions. He stays mobile, outrunning the bureaucracy of justice. But the most chilling part of the Goldberg loophole is his use of coercive control. This isn't just about a glass cage, it's about the strategic isolation of a victim from their support systems. He isolates Beck from her friends, Love from her family, and Marianne from her daughter. Legally, this is now a recognized offense in many jurisdictions, including the UK under the Serious Crime Act 2015. Yet, because Joe frames his control as care, the victims often don't realize they're being abused until the cage is already locked. Joe doesn't just hide from the law, he hides within the legal and social expectations of what a protective man looks like. He is the personification of how a predator navigates a system designed to react to blood, but not to the psychological erosion that precedes it. The Goldberg loophole is more than a plot device, it is a warning. It is a reminder that the law is a floor, not a ceiling. Just because someone isn't breaking the law yet doesn't mean they aren't destroying your life. If you rely on the system to tell you when you are in danger, you're already behind the curve. Predators like Joe don't fear the law, they study it. They find the gray zones and they build their lives there.